So 2.8, this is our remote learning session for this week. And so we need to talk about some operations that happen with functions. So it should be pretty straightforward. So let's start. And so this looks a little bit complicated, but it's pretty straightforward. What we're saying is you have two functions, f and g. So I've got two functions, f and g. I can combine those functions. Okay, just like you add two numbers, you can add two functions. So when you see something that looks like f plus g of x, all it means is you're adding the two functions f and g. Okay, when you see f minus g of x, that is creating a new function that you get by subtracting the two functions f and g. F multiplied by g, it's the function you get when you have the product of f and g. And f over g of x is the function you get by taking the quotient. That is taking f and dividing it by g. You have to pay a little bit of attention with domains, especially when you do dividing, because it could be that you divide by 0. So we'll take a look at that as we progress on. And let's just move on and do a couple of examples. So I've got two functions. F of x is x squared plus 1. G of x is 3x plus 5. Find f plus g of 1. Okay, so anytime I see something, when I see f plus g of x, what that really means, that is just simply f of x plus g of x. Okay, so I'm asked to find f plus g of 1. So f plus g, to evaluate that at the number 1, that is just f of 1 plus g of 1. So I plug in 1 to both equations. So what is f of 1? Here's f. Okay, so f of 1, this is going to be 1 squared plus 1. And then g of 1 is going to be 3 times 1 plus 5. So all I did was I looked at these two functions. Here's g and here's f. I plugged a 1 into both of those, and I'm adding those together. So this is going to be, my answer is 1 plus 3 plus 5, and that is going to be 10 is your answer. So that's how I find f plus g of 1. So it's just finding f of 1 and adding it to g of 1. Let's look at another example. Same functions. F is x squared plus 1. G of x is 3x plus 5. And I'm being asked to find a... so let me back up. Here what I'm finding is the difference. So it's f minus g of negative 3. So all this really means, f minus g, evaluate that at the number 3. So that is f of 3 minus g of 3. So what is f of 3? That says go to your definition of f and plug in a 3. So that's 3 squared plus 1. And then go to your definition of g and plug in a 3. So 3 times 3 plus 5. So notice it's f, which is this, minus g. Okay, so f, that's going to be, if I simplify this, I get 10 minus, 6 plus 5. And let me back up, sorry. This is a negative 3. So let me back up. I'm substituting f minus g of negative 3. So it's a negative that goes in there. So negative 3, and so I tell you what, let me just erase this. It'd be easier to erase it and go forward. So f minus g of negative 3. So let me just back up. Sorry about that. So it's f minus g of negative 3, which is f of negative 3 minus g of negative 3. So this is going to be, what is f of negative 3? That's a negative 3 squared plus 1 minus, what's g of negative 3? That's 3 times negative 3 plus 5. So I get, this is 9 plus 1 minus negative 9 plus 5. So this is 10 minus negative 4. Answer is 14. So that is the value of f minus g of negative 3. Now let's look at an example of a product, f times g of 5. So f times g of 5, that's simply f of 5 multiplied by g of 5. So what is f of 5? Here's f. So that's going to be 5 squared plus 1, and that gets multiplied by g of 5. G of 5 is 3 times 5 plus 5. So this becomes 26 times 15 plus 5 is 20, and that is 520. Okay, so you're just substituting values in for f and g. You're either adding those numbers, you're multiplying those numbers, or you are subtracting those numbers. Let's look at the next one. Same functions f and g. Let's find the quotient f divided by g of 0. So f divided by g of 0 is going to be f of 0 divided by g of 0. What is f of 0? So you plug in a 0 into that equation for f, and you get 0 plus 1. What is g of 0? If you plug a 0 in there, you get 3 times 0 plus 5. And so this is 1 over 5, or 1/5. So again, we're just plugging values in for the functions, and these are combinations of the functions. Either they're added, subtracted, multiplied, or divide. Let's switch gears a little bit. I've got a couple more functions here. F of x is 8x minus 9, and g of x is 2x minus 1. So let's find f plus g of x. Okay, so now what we're asking us to do is say, instead of plugging in a specific value, what is f of g of x? So this is going to be f of x plus g of x. Okay, so if I come down here, what is my definition of f of x? So f plus g of x is going to be, what is f of x? That's 8x minus 9 plus, what is g of x? Square root of 2x minus 1. So that's the expression for f plus g of x. And if I needed to evaluate this at a specific number, now I could plug that number. So I've got an algebraic expression that shows me what is f plus g of x. Same two functions, what is f minus g of x? So by definition, this is f of x minus g of x. So what is that? That is f of x. So that is 8x minus 9 minus g of x, 2x minus 1. So this is f minus g of x. So it's 8x minus 9 minus the square root of 2x minus 1. Find fg of x, the product. So remember, that's just all that means is f of x times g of x. So fg is going to be, what is f of x? That's 8x minus 9 times, what is g of x? Square root of 2x minus 1. So that's the product of f and g. And now we'll look at a quotient. What is f divided by g of x? By definition, that is just f of x divided by g of x. What is f of x? That's 8x minus 9. What is g of x? That's the square root of 2x minus 1. So f over g is 8x minus 9 over square root of 2x minus 1. So now we're asked to evaluate certain expressions. So if we look at these, find f plus g of 4. So f plus g of 4. If we go back to our definition, so what is f plus g? So this is f plus g is right here. So if I evaluate this, just go to a different color. F plus g of 4, all it means is put a 4 into this equation. So that's going to be 32 minus 9 plus the square root of, if I plug a 4 in here, this is what, 16, no, 2 times 4 is 8, 8 minus 1. So this becomes, what is 32 minus 9? That's going to be 23 plus the square root of 7. And let me back up. 23 plus the square root of 7 is the answer for f plus g of 4. So if I check that, f plus g of 4, if I look at that, and oh, sorry, they're not using the, just scratch that. I was thinking that they were using the definitions we previously had. So what they're saying here is look at the graph. So just scratch what I did here. Let's find f plus g of 4. So what is f of 4? You go over to 4, f of 4 is 9. Okay, so f of 4 is 9. What is g of 4? If you go over to 4, I get the value of 2. G of 4 is 2. F plus g is 11. You add them. So what is f minus g of negative 2? So if I go over to negative 2, what is f of negative 2? F of negative 2, I see, is a negative 3. So f of negative 2 is negative 3. What is g evaluated at negative 2? Well, there is no value of g at negative 2 because g only starts at 0, so it is undefined. So this one right here, f minus g of negative 2, that is undefined because g of negative 2 is undefined. So continuing on, let's look at f times g of 1. So this is f of 1 times g of 1. F of 1 is, it looks like 1, 2, 3. F of 1 is 3. So f of 1 is 3. And then g of 1 is 1. So 3 times 1 is 3. If we look at f over g of 0, f of 0, that's the blue line, f of 0 is 1. So this is going to be f of 0 over g of 0. F of 0 is 1. G of 0 is the red line. G of 0 is 0. This is 1 over 0. This is undefined. And I think that's the one that we just did. So the next example they're asking, I'm trying to think if these are just the explanations. These are the ones that we just worked through. So I think we're good with that. And that should be it. Okay, so all we're going to do in this section is pretty straightforward. Is you're given two functions. How do I find certain combinations? The adding of those two functions, the subtracting of those two functions, the multiplication of those two functions, and the division of those two functions. What you really just need to know in each of these cases is if you have two functions, f plus g of x, that means you take a value at x, you take its f value and you add its g value, okay? Then the difference, f minus g of x, is just going to be f of x minus g of x. The product, f times g of x, is going to be f of x, times g of x, and then the quotient, f divided by g, evaluated at x, is just simply f of x divided by g of x. Okay?